you remain standing, we will read and hear our gospel lesson for this morning, which comes to us from the Gospel according to St. John chapter 11, verses 32 through 44. John chapter 11, verses 32 through 44. And here's what it says. When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit, deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench, because he has been dead 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out!" And the dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. And Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. And you may be seated. So most of us know what last Wednesday was, of course, All Hallows Eve, Halloween. And I'm sure that a great many of you were engaged that day or evening in some sort of ghoulish fun. This only stands to reason, as one statistic I recently read showed that 70% of Americans celebrate the day in some form or fashion. It kind of blew my mind. And in fact, last year, consumers spent over $8 billion on the holiday, with about a quarter of that forked over just for costumes. And so, in some, Halloween is a big, big deal. And it seems to grow in popularity with each passing October. Less popular, I suppose, is the day that follows Halloween. Falling annually on November the 1st and marked on the closest Sunday is what the Western Church recognizes as the Feast of All Saints. Formally instituted by Pope Boniface IV in 609 of the Common Era and originally celebrated in May, its observance stems from the belief that there's a powerful spiritual bond between those in heaven and the living. Within Protestantism, the day is usually seen as an opportunity to give God solemn thanks for the lives and the deaths of God's saints, those who have lived faithfully and provided for us who remain an example of Christ-like existence. But whatever the precise focus, however we celebrate, I think that all of these ideas are caught up in and expressed beautifully by the lyrics that we sang earlier. For all the saints who from their labors rest, who thee by faith before the world confess. Thy name, O Jesus, be forever blessed. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Life beyond the present age. Perfect, complete, whole, everlasting life in the company of God. That is the thought. That's the hope toward which this day typically draws our attention. And so it seems strange, from my perspective, that the gospel lesson prescribed for this morning is one which doesn't appear to give us that. But we are brought face to face with death, to the familiar scene which we've approached, and the story which we have heard possibly hundreds of times as we are guided to Bethany, to the tomb where the body of Lazarus lay. 4 days he's been dead. 4 days his friends have wailed and wept. 4 days his dear sisters, Mary and Martha, have wondered whether Jesus would come. When he does arrive, Martha greets him first, then Mary, but both offer the precise same assessment. And what is it? If you had been here, my brother would not have died. Which I take to mean you could have prevented this. You should have stopped this. Why didn't you? Where were you, Jesus? And some of the bystanders do ask as much. He healed the blind man. Could he have prevented this death? Can you hear the grief in their voices? Can you understand the ache in their hearts? Can you attest to feeling, to wondering the same? Then Jesus comes to the cave, ordering the stone at its opening to be moved. Martha, who only moments ago confessed Jesus to be the Messiah, the only time in the Gospels that these words come out of a woman's mouth, she protests. It seems she feels that whatever Jesus intends to do can't be done because Jesus encourages her to trust him. Jesus pauses, and then he prays. And then he shouts, "Lazarus, come out!" And he who had been dead emerges from the grave. Again, it's a story that we know very well. And it's a wondrous scene, both shocking and joy-filled. But it doesn't exactly seem to fit among the rest of what we say and sing and pray today. Until we look again at Jesus' question to Martha. Did I not tell you that if you believe, you would see the glory of God? Because friends, what we need to know today is that that's the point of the story. That is the main idea being conveyed, the revelation of the glory of God, the revelation of God's presence, of God's activity, of God's movement. And in this story, that revelation happens through resurrection. Through a physical raising to life from the dead. But here's what I think that we need to be aware of. Here's what I think we need to hear and to know. And that is that all of God's mightiest manifestations of divine glory are, in essence, resurrections. They are, in the final analysis, resurrections. That is to say, God's movement undoing death, undoing that which binds us in a state that opposes what God wills for us, and instead, in its place, giving life. Think with me for just a moment about all the shapes, all the forms of this tale. When an addict chooses to struggle against their substance abuse. That's resurrection. When a young person decides that they're not going to let the opinions of others determine their self-worth and their value, that's resurrection. When a young person decides that they are not going to let themselves be bullied, but that they are going to stand on what God says is true about them, that is resurrection. When someone long burdened by the weight of grief or depression finally sees the clouds part, that is resurrection. When persons oppressed by unjust structures find liberation, that is resurrection. When people in broken relationship find a point of reconciliation, that is resurrection. When a wandering soul discovers the light of God's love and owns that life for themselves, that is resurrection. Because you see, as Christians, as followers of the Christ, our primary affirmation is that of resurrection, because that is where our story truly begins. It doesn't begin, as some might presume, in a stable with an infant. It doesn't begin with the whirling flames and the chaotic tongues of Pentecost. Friends, it doesn't even begin upon an old rugged cross. Our story, our faith story, begins with the best of all good news. He is not here. He is risen. The definitive declaration of our faith. The most astonishing demonstration of divine authority and the foundation upon which all of our hope is built. Our story begins with the proclamation that God will destroy the shroud that is cast over all peoples, swallowing up death forever. Simply, our story begins with the truth of a God who makes all things new. And as a resurrection people, as people who own this, who trust this, who believe this and proclaim this, we must celebrate and point to every sign of that power that we witness in our world and in our lives. And that brings us back to today. That brings us back to the celebration of all saints. And we celebrate the saints because of their faithful witness. And rightly so. We celebrate who they were. We celebrate what they taught. We celebrate how they loved. But if that were our only reason to celebrate this day, our doing so would be woefully incomplete. Because what we truly celebrate today, what we truly celebrate as we honor them, is the God who was and who is and who will be alive in them. We celebrate the God who made them and the God who remade them. In short, we celebrate today, of all days, resurrection. The power of the Creator to recreate, the power of our Maker to call forth life. Our proclamation today is joy. Joy for our sisters and our brothers who have shown us the way to the church triumphant. But our proclamation, even more, is joy for the might of the God who showed them the way. The God whose glory transformed their lives, the God whose glory filled their lives, the God whose glory and might upends even death, the God in whose grace we are embraced all the days of our lives, both here and beyond. And so, dear friend, as we remember and as we give thanks for our loved ones and for all who have gone before us in the faith, may we trust in the promise that as God loves them, so God loves us. As God guided them, so God guides us. And as God holds them, so God holds us. And may we remember that as we open our eyes to them, signs of God's glory, of God making everything new, are all around us. And they are ours to see and to share. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.